Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar organized by JetBrains. I'm Paul Everett, Python and Web Developer Advocate. I'll be your host. You may have noticed that a very short time ago, June, we had another webinar on Git with Michael Kennedy. Why are we doing a Git webinar again just 2 months later? Let me introduce the reason. My colleague, my life coach, my spiritual advisor, Marco Behler. Marco, welcome.
Hello, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Marco and I were joking in the warm-up that we could just roll out here and say, this is a Pro Git tip webinar. There's only one thing: delete your repo, start over, goodbye, end of webinar. We'll try and do a better job than that. Marco, the webinar with Michael, he was teaching Git with a little bit of PyCharm, but you wound up doing a video that sparked something in my mind. You did a 5 Git tips video for IntelliJ. It was really the Git UI in all of our IDs. And I thought, that's something I need. I admit I studied the crap out of some of those tips. And I thought, if that's something I need, it's probably something that intermediate PyCharmers need as well. So here you are. First, how do you frame the Git support in our IDEs?
I mean, let me just say, I think everyone, including myself, needs more Git tips and tricks and whatever. There's a never-ending stream of Git tips out there waiting for you. But when it comes to our IDE integration, what I've seen in the past, essentially, is you've got the two camps, the people who say, I'm going to use Git on the console because I don't trust the IDE support. And then you've got the IDE users who do stuff in the IDE and not necessarily know what is happening behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. And I think that our IDEs make it really, really nice that you can do pretty much everything from inside the IDE once you learn the Git tool window and what's possible. Plus, you can always see what IntelliJ executes behind the scenes in the Git console, and I think we're going to get into that later on. So I think it's the best of both worlds, and I think it's just a great support. So that's my 5 cents.
And you actually, in your video, you have a very good way of putting it for those salty people who are like, I'm just going to use the command line.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah. We'll put a link up to your tip video in a little bit. You do a lot of videos. We were joking about that as well. You do a lot of videos for your personal channel, for JetBrains, including talking about Git. Do you think intermediate level Git, is it just hard to teach?
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, hard to teach. I don't think anything is really super hard to teach if you get into the mindset of the one who is being taught, I suppose, and just take it step by step. And I mean, that's why we're here. We're just trying to teach people, giving them sensible stuff they can apply in their day-to-day work life. Starting tomorrow or just right now after the webinar. So let's see in the comments what people say if we succeeded, and then we'll know if it was simple to teach or not.
As you were saying that, Turner says in the comments, Git can get kind of tricky. So usually with advocates, we're taught to lead with, don't worry, you can't break anything.
You can, just delete the repository and reclone it.
Just delete the repository and start over. Okay, we have a lot to cover. Let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to go to the next slide. Ooh, nope. Sasha did that for me. We'd like to make this webinar as live and conversational as possible and funny. So we'll try and share some jokes. We'll also try and reply to some of the comments as we go along. If you have any questions at all during the webinar, ask them. Feel free to ask them as soon as you have them. Don't wait until the end. Talk during the presentation. We're going to break this into segments on each tip, and we'll take a look over and answer any questions you have as we go along. Marco's going to take the theory today. I'm the pretty face, and I'll be doing the demos. Usually the most common question is this webinar being recorded? YouTube, Twitch, of course it's being recorded. And somebody in 3 minutes is going to come into the chat and say, hey, is this thing being recorded? Yes, it's being recorded. It will be published as soon as we're done right there on YouTube. But you can also watch our PyCharm blog, where we will make an announcement about the recording being available and anything related to it. Okay, for this webinar, I'll be doing the driving. This is the link to the repository that I'll be using with a README that is broken into all the tips that I'm going to be showing. So you can follow along if you would like to. To a large degree, I'm just going to be reading from the screen. So I could be replaced by an AI or sub AI or something. And Marco will be giving commentary as I go along. First, let's go over some background material. We actually have a lot that we have already done that's available for Git in our IDEs. Marco's video. It's not that long. It's under 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, just a couple minutes, I think 7 or so.
And the 5 things that he shows are things that you should know, especially intermediate level. So recommend taking a look at Marco's video. This is the webinar that Michael Kennedy did with us 2 months ago, and it was talking about a Git course. By the way, I think I've got links for these in the README as well. Actually, how about I paste into chat the GitHub repo, and I will put it in both Twitch and YouTube. This is the course that Michael had on the basics of Git using 2 different IDEs and a GUI tool, Git Tower, I think. Highly recommended. I went through all of it. We have some tips in the PyCharm guide and all the other guides on using version control. Some of the ones that I'll be showing today are directly lifted from that. So if you want to see a longer form treatment, we have the links available. Our colleague Merritt has some tips about interactive rebase, which is, Marco, I'd say that's kind of intermediate plus plus.
It is intermediate plus plus, yeah, I'd say so too. Great video, by the way.
It is. These are individual tips, but she's gathered them up into a 12-minute first video, and I think another one is coming, and the second one's really good. Okay, so that's it on the slides. Let's go ahead and switch over to my screen, and we are going to do some driving in the IDE. Okay, very first one, Marco touched on this. This is kind of a meta one, which is you have a colleague who is 97 years old, does everything from the command line, and makes fun of you for wanting to have a comprehensible and pleasant way of using Git. You don't have, this isn't an either or, you can have both. And this is the example of it. I'm going to go into the Git tool. And this is what you may be familiar with seeing, but there's this other tab, which I actually didn't appreciate until I watched Marco's video. And it shows you what Git is doing behind the scenes, the actual commands that are being run. Marco, riff on this one a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what you need to know is that IntelliJ, whenever you do something, whenever you click something in the IDE, and it doesn't matter if it's PyCharm, IntelliJ IDE, across all our IDEs, it works the same way. You execute real Git commands in the background, and the console shows you exactly what commands IntelliJ executed. So, Paul, if you now just update your project, for example, if you just do anything in the just update project, okay, then you'll see that Git now, IntelliJ just executed a Git fetch and a couple of parameters you don't need to worry about for now, but that's essentially it. I mean, you have that line, you can see exactly what happened in the background.
And I guess this is, if you're ever like, oh, what do they mean here?
Yes, exactly. Because sometimes, I mean, there's once or twice whenever a new feature comes out support, maybe the wording isn't perfect, but then you'll always find out. You just click the button, as we said earlier. If something bad happens, just delete your repository and reclone it. But in between, you'll find out by just executing the command and looking in the Git console, you'll find out exactly what IntelliJ is executing for you, PyCharm is executing for you. And as Paul said, super useful for colleagues who are, let's say, passive aggressive or more conservative, right? But it's just helpful in general to understand what is my IDE doing.
And Marco, we can do that developer advocate mind trick where we prompt something in the discussions. For all of you in the chat, do you have any colleagues that really want you or really advocate for using the command line for Git. I know that's a thing. Do any of you have that experience? And how do you feel about it? Do you feel like you're more comfortable on the command line, or do you think that the IDE putting a GUI on it can be helpful?
I've had many such colleagues in the past, and please do let us know. It would be interesting to know, because sometimes people do everything on the command line. Sometimes they don't trust whatever 2 or 3 commands and do them on the command line. The rest are out, from the IDE. Sometimes they use the IDE fully. Let us know what you're doing.
All right, we have one saying for the CLI, and Turner makes a good point. It's like, okay, go ahead and do it the hard way. I'm going to be sitting over here being productive. Okay, let's jump into the first Git tip, which is don't use Git. Sometimes Git can't help you. I will show 2 scenarios for this, and we will use the IDE's local history tool, probably the most undiscovered and crucial feature that we ship. And when people find out about it, they lament all the hours of work they lost because they didn't know about it. So I'm in my repo, and let's say I add a file, and I'm going to add it to version control, and I'm going to add another one, and I'm all good, and I delete one of them. Now, when I go to my commit window, I'm screwed. Page 5's gone because it was within the boundary, the transaction, within the boundary of a commit. If I put any work into page 5, I would just be hosed. Git can't help me. But what can help me is local history. I can go to the container for that file that I deleted. I can go to local history, show history for my selection. In this case, the selection isn't a file, it's the directory. And it's going to tell me there was an event, the deleting event, and I can revert it. And not only will the IDE bring the file back, it will offer to put it back into version control. And so there we go. There's my page 5, back from the dead.
And that is pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. It applies if you deleted like 5 things. And so, Marco, we will talk in a moment about local history, what is its boundaries and settings and things like that. Now, that's a file. What about a change within a file? So I'm on page 5, and I make a correction, and I go clean this up. And then I realize, oh, wait a second. I just changed some text that was really important. I could do the undo, and hope that I land on my target. Again, this isn't going to help me because I didn't actually commit the first version. So what can I do to help myself? I can go again to local history, in this case on the file itself, show history, and I see that I have the diff viewer, and I can put it back the way it was before without using Git. That's local history for a deletion of a file and a change to a file. Marco, do you want to talk a little bit about local history? What determines those entries in the list, and any policies about how long it keeps things?
That's a good question. So the first question I can't actually properly answer. I have to wing it. But the second question is, I think we save all these changes for 5 days, for 5 work days. It has changed across the in the past couple of years. And there's actually a setting in the IDE where you can change, I think, that the policy of how far along we should keep those changes. So you can increase it, decrease it, and whatever. There's also an upper limit on, you cannot have 20,000 changes in there, but I'm not entirely sure about that. But I do know that the 5 days working policy, or the 5 days policy is the default for the local history.
Yeah. I think the way I understand the first one is, what is it that it is showing here? I think of it as editor transactions, like what undo would do. And so if I like did undo, I would go down, 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 down in the stack of commits as editor transactions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's true. It just sounds true.
It sounds true.
Say it with confidence, right? Okay, on to the next one. Reword message. So for example, I just made a couple of changes. I added page 5, made a change to the text, added page 6. So I'm going to add a message with, as we all know, Americans are the best at English.
Massage.
All right. And then as soon as I click commit, as the mouse is coming up, I always spot that I screwed it up. But Marco, it's too late, right? Because I committed.
It's never too late.
Never too late.
You can always, I mean, just go ahead and you can reword. That's a tricky one to say for a German, because it's not a revert, it's a reword. Okay, yeah. All right.
It sounds like revert, right?
Yeah, exactly. Please reword the message. You just need to right-click it in our nice, pretty log, and then you can reword it.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing where if you told me to go do this on the command line, I'd be like, what? Did you just tell me to go screw myself? So instead, I can go find the commit. I haven't pushed yet. And Marco will talk to us in a moment about the implications of whether you've pushed or not. I can right click on it and it becomes so freaking easy to switch your massage to a message. And as far as your Git history is concerned, when I push it, Marco, it's correct. It never said massage, right?
It never said massage, but could you please open up the console to see what actually, so we can actually try and see what now happened, right? And this is, I mean, if what actually happened is you didn't just the last exactly. You actually did a new commit, an amend commit, but essentially you're creating a completely new commit. Right. So, I mean, you reverted that message, but it's not like you changed the old commit. You actually created a completely new commit. And that was, I think, what you were referring to earlier, that the problem is if you had already pushed, then you would run into problems because now you're trying to push a new commit against a different state on your remote origin, so to speak.
Right. And this is where actually in your video, you got some salty replies from people saying that you were encouraging people to screw up their history and stuff like that, right?
Yes, I did. But in the end, I mean, we'll come to that. I'm a big fan of if it comes to later on with forcing pushes. IntelliJ will nevertheless always use force with lease, the force with lease option, which will make sure that no one, you can't push something if someone else has modified your repository. So I'm totally fine with that. But I did get some salty messages.
Let's go over to the channel. C. Tyndall has a very good point about local history. This is kind of intermediate plus plus. I can go to a, we'll say a container, a directory, go to local history, and do kind of the moral equivalent of a commit message. Marco, would you?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Yeah.
And I could say something like one of Marco's great commit messages, like working.
Exactly.
And then when I get, and I will make a change. And then when I go to local history, I'll see that there is this little label in the timeline that's kind of like a point in time reference and then a change that was above it. So if you kind of get to a good known state and you want to divide your work into little batches, put label is a good point for that. Marco, got anything to add to that?
No, it's good. I was just thinking that I've seen people in the past, zipping up the local state, essentially putting it on network drive and renaming that file to our label, essentially. But I'm happy to not see that anymore. So yeah, just use the local history with the tag. That's it.
Okay, and Pablo was asking, how do we get to that? I think you, in this case, that was log versus console. You're asking log. Pablo, if I got that wrong, put in a new message and see if maybe what you meant was this. Not sure. That's a right click on a commit. Okay. All right, Marco, you feel like you covered the implications of what you can do before pushing?
Yes, I mean the thing is, I think we'll see it again in a second in the next segment, essentially. But with rebasing or any sort of, whenever you change your commits locally and they diverge to what has been pushed already, you'll run into problems, let's say, and you either need to force push with the least, or you need to do something, to realign the states essentially. But yeah, that's that.
Okay, on to the next one, which is undo last commit. This is a couple of these I picked because I do these all the time. And so maybe you've made some changes, and again, you click commit, and just as the finger is coming up, you realize, oh, bleep, I left something out. I shouldn't have committed that. And now I'm going to have a Marco commit history with blah, 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 blah. I'm joking because in Marco's video, he talked about his tendency to have a twitchy finger when it comes to committing. And I realized that my page numbers were wrong in the body. I just copied these two files from page 4, and maybe I didn't fix up the body, and I shouldn't have committed yet because I wasn't done. And I haven't pushed yet. Now, what I could do is go edit those files and then commit. But then what do I have? A commit history with too much stuff in it. So in this case, I've got the commit that is a little dirty. What I could do, and let me put the window open right now, and I will actually undo this, put it back the way it was. All right, what I'm going to do is that commit that I wished I didn't commit, my wishes will come true because I can just walk up to it and say undo commit. Now, let's have a little theory time. So Marco, let's talk about what this means. Our IDEs forever and ever and ever have had this super cool and underused facility called change lists. Places to put work that isn't finished. You can put them in multiple change lists. And maybe you got to go fix a bug on a branch or something, but you don't want to commit yet. You could put it aside, go over, come back, bring it back off of the change list into your work. Marco, is that your way of looking at change lists? How do you use change lists?
To be honest, I don't use them too often at the moment. And I think when it comes to changes, we'll actually see what happens now when you actually now put in, I mean, you can go with the name changes, okay, and then have a look at the console, what IntelliJ actually did, right? So when you look at, we just did the commit. So the last one exactly should be a git reset soft, right? Because actually undoing a commit in Git terms issues such a git reset soft kind of thing. But the change list, on the other hand, is more of an, as far as I know, an IntelliJ specific addition. It's not like an intrinsic Git addition, right? So it's two parallel concepts, where you then put stuff onto the change list, you can get it out again, and then, add the stuff, re-add, which will spawn, the correct Git commands. But it's two parallel concepts, so to speak. And yeah, you can use them. I don't use them like every day, but now and then I do.
Yep. I think people have gotten used to like Git stash as a facility, but this changes facility is independent of the underlying version control system.
Yes.
So Marco's right. This is what it did behind the scenes to put your head back the way it was before, but we didn't want to throw out the work that you did. So we put it into the change list, and now it reapplied to the files once they were put back in their original place. And so we now see the changes that would have been thrown out. Real quick over in chat, Christopher makes a good point that Command 9 in Mac, Alt 9 in Windows brings up the Git tool window or hides it. And I'm running the presentation assistant, which shows you down in the bottom the keystrokes that I'm doing. And yes, 2 gold stars, as Turner points out, 2 gold stars for Christopher. Bring that up. Actually, think you gave him 10 gold stars. Okay. Undo last commit. So we now are back to basically where we were, Marco, when my finger was going down on the commit button, right?
Yeah. And the problem is you have already pushed, I think, before that. Or did you?
Have
you not?
Yeah,
you haven't pushed it. Yeah. Okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's say I'm like, okay, good. Now I can go to these files and fix them and say, I'm going to make this page 5, 5th, and I'm going to make this page 6. Now I'm going to add a massage. Right? I'm going to commit. I'm not going to push. Now we have a commit in our little Sweemlang thingy down here that is the way I wanted it to be. Except what I really wanted was a period at the end of the title on all of these files. Again, Marco, I've committed, so I'm screwed, right?
You're never screwed.
Never screwed. What I can do is go and make those changes. And so, for example, I'll go back to the other one. And
I think that's the main takeaway from this video. You're never screwed. There's always a way around. I mean, there's always a way to fix it. Again, check the Git console if you don't trust what the IDE is doing, but there is always a way.
And that way might be a Git thing, or it may be an IDE on top of Git kind of thing. We use our IDEs to write the IDE. As you can imagine, it's a pretty complicated piece of software with a lot of people and a lot of teams and pushing the limits of what we need from good VCS integration. So it's very mature, a lot of bells and whistles for practical usage. So here I am. This is one that I use all the time too. I had some changes that I really wish would have gone in that other commit. And I could like do a new commit and then do squash and stuff like that. But instead, I do this all the time. And then this set of changes becomes a part of that commit, essentially from the outside world's perspective, as if it was all done at once. Marco, you're probably going to tell me to go to console, right?
Yes, to the console, but you also would have had to select all your changes.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. And now that was too late and the amend button. Yes.
Too fast.
Yes.
Oh.
But you just undo the commit if you
Practical example.
Yeah, practical example.
Now.
Yes. Look at that. Look at that.
It's almost like we planned that.
It's almost like we planned that, or you could have just deleted your repository and recloned it. So yeah. Okay, let's amend the commit. Yeah.
All right. Mm-hmm. And we see, if I click on the commit, we see that all those files are now in the changes for that. And we go to console.
Yep. And yes. And there you see that it was a commit and it was amended, essentially, an amend commit. And exactly, I mean, yeah, you see, again, I want to hammer this down in the console. You see exactly what's happening.
Yep. Good point. Okay. Question now from Milan. Why Git stash was not used for this change list feature under the hood? It predated Git stash. It actually probably predated Git. We probably had change list support before Git was created. Marco, what do you think? Possible?
Yeah, possible. Yeah, but in the end, I think it was just either that or a combination of that and being independent of any VCS you're using under the hood, essentially.
Right.
So it doesn't matter.
Version or Mercurial or whatever.
Yes.
Yep. All right. Let's see. We'll go on to the next one, which is partial commit. Another one, which if I had to do it from the command line, it would be 2 hours of reading for me to figure it out. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my files and I'm going to change, let's see, in page 1, I'm going to get rid of the, I'm going to actually change it to 1. Page 2, I'm going to get rid of the period. Page 3, I'll say this is page 3. And then in the body, I'll make a change. And then I will delete page 6. All right, when I go back to the commit window, I see 4 things have changed. But what if we decided, you know what? They tell us in Git to try and have kind of atomic commits. And I'm mixing some things up. That deletion wasn't a unit of work, and the body change wasn't a unit of work. I want to do a commit just for the title changes. Well, I could undo all of those other changes, do a commit, and then redo all the changes. But we have partial commit support. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this file deletion out of the list of changes. And then second, I'm going to go to the diff view of page 3, and I'm going to, Marco, is unstaged the right word? Is that the right Git word?
Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
I'm going to say that within this file, I'm going to keep some of the changes in the commit. Other changes I'm not going to put in the commit.
What's actually happened, which is very funky, what's being executed in the console. You'll see it in a second, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so I will then say fixed up the titles. Right? And I will do a for real commit. And look at some of the things it's doing here. It's giving you a little indicator that some of the changes in that file, and then this was unselected. So I'll do a commit. And what we see afterwards is after this commit, my working copy has changes that need to be committed. What are those changes? Well, they change to the body and the deletion of the file. So let's take a look at the console, see what happened. Marco, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing here is, as far as I understand it, when we do that git add, what essentially is what IntelliJ does with the partial commits, with the where you do not commit something in a specific file, right? So just a specific line. There's this line actually up there, which is the git update index cache info line, and that git update index cache info line is what makes the partial commit in the end work, because IntelliJ updates Git's working cache to just use, you know, the stuff you actually want to commit and put it into the index. You do the commit, and afterward you're still in your file is still there, and then so the remaining stuff is still there. It's a horribly complex explanation, and I feel I couldn't properly whatever explain that. In the end, what you have to understand is go through it, have a look at what update index does, but that is the key to the partial committing inside files.
Indeed, and if I had to type that command,
yeah, it's
bad
funky.
things, man, bad things. Okay, we have a question. Does PyCharm have something like VS Code, which can open a project from the terminal? In fact, it does. There are command line helpers that can be installed. So, for example, I can go to a directory and say PyCharm space dot, and it will open that directory in PyCharm. It doesn't really mean anything to like open a file instead of a directory. Trick Michael Kennedy does all the time, though, is he just uses Finder to like drag a, you're over there, wrong window. Drag a window, like I'll go to my projects. And like this is a project, he will drag and drop it onto the PyCharm icon and does the equivalent of going to the command line for that. All right. If any of you have any other questions, it can be about what we're talking about for Git, or it can be about PyCharm in general, or if you have a tip, if you have something that you would like us to show and we're not too terrified to show it, we'll show it to everybody else. Okay, onward. That was partial commit. Let's show changes in a gutter. So I have the commit tool window open, tells me what files have changed, but what within a file actually changed. So I'm going to go to page 3. Actually, I would probably be in the project tool, and I would see a color coding saying that page 3 changed. But for one, not only do I turn off tabs, I usually turn off my project tool. I don't want to have to go somewhere else and lose my context to see the changes. Guess what? It's telling me right there that this block changed. And in fact, if I added some more, and then if I made a change up here, I would see color coding to tell me the change type, green versus blue versus red, as well as where the change was. Now, but there's more that it can do. You can go and click on it and get some operations on that. For example, if I don't want that change to be in the commit, or if I want to undo that change and put it back to its state at the last commit, this is one thing that I do all the time. I go to a block, I roll back just that change. Or if I want to compare it to what's in the committed state, I can get a diff of just that block. And there are some other operations you can do, like if you really believe in change lists, you could move that change out of the way, come back and get it later. Marco, are you a big fan of the gutter or not?
I am, and the thing is, and it doesn't only have to do with the Git gutter, whatever. There's so much stuff happening in the gutter, and it's always in. I mean, it's so easy to overlook, essentially. And then once someone tells you about it, for example, I'm more from the Java world and Spring framework, and there's a ton of things, Spring-related things in the gutter. Once people see and understand those icons or the colors, whatever, they cannot unsee them, and they start using them daily. But unless someone tells you, you just ignore the colors and you think, oh, something's broken in PyCharm or whatever. No, I'm a big fan, and what should I say? You demonstrated it nicely.
I would like to apologize to everybody in chat because even though I promised Sasha I wouldn't do it, I still replied to both Twitch and YouTube, which I corrected just now. I don't think we actually have anything coming in from Twitch, so I don't have to worry about it. Okay, and Marco, do you want to talk? How familiar are you with the stuff coming about kind of code lens style annotations in blocks?
I'm not really familiar with that.
Okay, so some of the IDEs in the next release cycle, certainly IntelliJ, will in the block have some annotations about who made the change, the equivalent of get blame, the equivalent of coming over here and doing annotate with get blame. But instead of wasting all that real estate, it puts it in line with some operations that you can do to see more about the change. Okay, now we're going to get into Marco's features.
Yay.
All right. And we will spend the rest of our time going over this kind of intermediate level Git stuff. Okay, I'm on a feature branch. I will put myself on a feature branch. Route. Nice, clear commit message. And I will make a new feature branch, and I'll do it my way. Initials as a prefix. And so I'll be doing some work on the feature branch. Behind the scenes, Marco is going to go on main, and he's going to make a change to page 4. He's going to push it.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm better.
And this is simulating, while he's doing that, this is simulating work in a project with multiple people. And there's work that's being wrapped up on feature branches, pushed to main, and you're over here on your feature branch and you're out of date. And things can go wrong if you don't pay attention to what's happening. All right. So I show back up into work today, and I'm on my branch, and I've been on my branch for 9 months because this is a big feature. And let's say that I come back to work and I know that there's other people on the project. How would I know whether there was work done on main? So Marco, did you push?
I did push.
Okay. All right. So what I could do is update project, and it would go and get stuff. But if I come down to the super duper Let's see. Super
tool window.
Yeah, super duper branch tool window. I see this little icon on main. Now that's saying that I have uncommitted changes that didn't go out.
That's true. And we're actually missing another nice little icon saying that we have nice changes coming in as well.
All right. And so, Marco, what's the solution to this? You do talk about this a little bit in your video.
It's a good question, actually. I thought that on the predetermined interval, IntelliJ actually checks what's happening and shows
we
you
might not have gotten to that point yet. So what I should do is I should come and do this every day, right?
Yeah, you can do.
All right. There's also the option. Oh, I haven't pushed yet. So what I want to do is fetch, right?
Yeah, do it. Yeah.
Okay. So with fetch done.
Let's see. That's a bit sad.
Yeah. Now I've collected information about the other commits. I haven't actually pulled those commits down. I've collected the fact that main has some changes.
Look, there we go.
There's our little icon.
Yes.
The blue down arrow icon says, hey, there's stuff over there on main that you don't have, that you're not aware of.
Exactly. And usually when you don't do it like in such a short time frame like Paul and I just did, you usually have the blue arrow and you'll see what happens.
Right. It was just too close of a period of time. Over in the Git log window, the little swim lane window, I see that this is true. I started some work from this commit on the origin, the remote, on my local main, but on the origins main, Marco did a commit.
With a really sensible commit message.
Marco special. And Marco, do you have anything else before we go into resolving this? Do we have anything else you want to talk about this kind of swim lane view?
I mean, the thing is, again, what helps with the swim lane is kind of to get accustomed to it and maybe, go through it a couple of times yourself, that you understand that essentially every bubble that you see, or every colored point is a commit. And that, because sometimes people are confused when you see that left straight line, it says more links, refine outline. That was one commit. And then there's a huge straight line up to my commit, the really commit up at the top. But it's really just two commits, which came right after each other, which is the state of origin main to the remote repository. Whereas Paul's local state in his main branch is from more links, refine outlet, to the next commit, which is add a message to the next commit, which is fix up the titles and so on and so forth. So again, I think just spending a bit of time just, going through these visual lines a couple of times and just figuring out, hey, every bubble or every point is a commit. That's it. And you see the branches there essentially, including is it local, is it on origin? Just go through that and work with that.
And what I want you to do is imagine a big project with lots of branches, lots of people, and actually multiple remotes, multiple upstreams, like you might be on a fork. And that can get really confusing. This swim lane view is a fantastic resource that all of us, the two of us included, aren't using to its full potential. There are many, many features about walking up to places and right-clicking in here and getting information and doing operations. It really is fantastic.
Yep. It's essentially, it's like your headquarters. So the whole log, I mean, there's even things like, the search where you can do a quick search for the commit message and you just see, you see those commits with the commit message, right-clicking every commit and doing something, starting something, all the filter operations. I mean, it's just the headquarters, so to speak.
Okay, so I now see that Marco made a change. And I probably would like to pull it over into my feature branch so that later when I merge, I have less chance of a conflict. And what this really means is I need to go get the changes on those branch. All I have right now is the notice that there are changes. I don't have the actual changes. So I got to get those changes and I need to get them onto my branch. 2 different ways to do this: merge and rebase. Marco.
Yes, I mean merge and rebase, just as a bit, because merging and rebasing is such a huge topic for people. But at the end of the day, git merge, you take 2 commits, and you have a merge commit afterwards. There's the specific case for fast forward merge, but let's forget that for now. So that is 2 commits having a merge commit afterwards. Rebasing is essentially, what you can see in Paul's swim lane, the add a message commit, which is highlighted at the moment in his Git log, is based off the more links refine outline commit. And we want to rebase it. So we want to make it be based off a different commit, which is the really commit. That way we can potentially save the merge commit. And that's what we should do.
This is a controversial topic. There are people who actively say rebase is madness. Don't ever do just suck it up and have merge. But the 2 hosts of this call do not believe that. And so here we go. We're going to get those changes by taking our branch and saying, hey, instead of pretending that you came from here, pretend you came from here. And Marco's video shows 3 ways to do this. I'm going to go to the end and do it all in one shot. Most of you don't know how to do this, so pay attention. But say differently, I didn't know how to do this. So go down the branch tool window, and instead of operating here locally, because we don't have those changes yet, and we would have to do a 2-step operation to get the changes, then rebase on top of them. Instead, I'm going to go here and immediately be perplexed with the complexity of what I'm looking at.
Exactly. And that is the thing. So in the end, what you want to do is you want to go with the pull into PMy feature using rebase, which essentially does a git fetch and a git rebase. Here the wording is a bit off, and you'll see in the console later on what it did, but this is what you should do. Yeah.
This is doing both at once, right?
Yep, it's doing both at once.
Okay. Pay attention to the swim lanes. I should have done that. I should have had a little contest to see who could predict what the swim lanes would look like.
Yeah.
So what the swim lanes did, this is actually kind of funny. This little, oh, no.
Yeah.
Like playing Frogger or something. I just dated myself.
True.
But Marco, are the swim lanes the way you expected them to be?
I mean, essentially what you need to do is, and also that is sometimes confusing because now the lanes look different. What you have to imagine, what did we try and do before? We had the add a massage or the add a message commit, and we wanted to base it off my really commit. And that is essentially what happened. Yeah. So this is why the swim lane now looks that way.
We're now back to one line instead of 2 separate lines.
Yes.
Because go ahead.
Yeah, the confusion is with not the confusion with Paul's setup. We have Paul's feature branch, the my feature branch. We have origin main, and we have the local main branch, which you can see with the tags, and they have different states, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But this is, I mean, in the end, what we expect.
Yep. All right, and behind the scenes, what does the console look like?
Yes, look at that. It did a git fetch and did a git rebase, almost like we said it would.
Almost.
So, yeah.
It's almost as if we ripped this off of some guy's video.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, we will speed up a little bit. Actually, what we'll do is we'll see, did we get Marco's change? Well, what was Marco's change? I'm going to walk up to that commit. He changed page 4. How did he change page 4? He added the very clever word really.
Hey.
And so I got it. I now have it locally in my feature branch. I got caught up with the work that Marco did on main. Okay, we'll answer a quick question from Sadie B. We are not developers of the IDEs. If I ever put anything into PyCharm, somebody would very quickly remove it or
We're
fix
just
it.
the guys who do the talking.
We're the pretty face.
Yeah.
And JetBrains is the company that makes PyCharm, IDEs, tools like TeamCity, a CI tool that Marco's on the team for. Okay, messy commit history. This is a funny part of Marco's video because he shows his happy fingers committing too fast on this stuff. What we'll do is we'll say, I'm working on this feature branch. When I commit this, Marco is going to be like, dude, 3 tiny commits. You know that these commits are separate entries and everyone forever and ever is going to have to look at them. Why didn't you just do them all at once? Well, good news, we can combine all of those commits and make it look as if it was one commit using a feature called Squash. So what we'll do is we'll select these 3 and we'll right click. We won't go to the command line and try to remember the chant for this. And we will go to Squash commits. And what it's going to do is it's going to say, do you want to leave the commit message with the 3 previous commit messages? Or do you want to say something like, okay, as Marco requested. And now, wait, before I click OK, everyone in the audience, what do you think the swim lane will look like after I click OK? All right.
Yay, look at that. And by the way, if I might just add, so we have now one nice little commit, cleanup as Marco requested, with all your changes, by the way. So when you highlight the cleanup as Marco requested commit now in the commit log, I mean, you'll see on the right, there's all your changes from the 3 commits you did earlier. But what I read online is, so if you start a new job and it doesn't plan out the way, let's say it's a bad company for whatever reason, and you want to take revenge, and please don't do that in real life. What you would do is you would clone the repository, squash all the commits that the repository ever had into one commit, and then do a force push. That will make sure that people will hate you and terminate you right away. Now, I'm just kidding. That is something that I read as a funny joke somewhere. Just squash all the commits from a repository and force push, but don't do that.
All right. Yes, Marco is from Germany, works in the Munich office. How did I get to the recent files on Mac? It's watch down here. You'll see the keystroke pop up. Command E, Control E for Windows Linux. You can also start speed typing. So I could say README. Or I could do terminal to go to a tool instead of a file. This is the way I navigate my files. I don't use the project tool window. And there are options to limit to not just things you visited, but things you edited. Okay, Marco, if you could, let's see. Could you add another commit to another file?
Just any other file.
Any other file. So what we're going to do this time is instead of just saying, I want those changes, we're going to look at the changes first and decide whether I want them. We're not really going to get into this concept of cherry picking. Why? Because I don't know how to do it.
Just adding something to page 2 on main branch,
page
right?
Page 2 on main. Page 2 on main. Perfect.
Page 2 on main, right. Okay, so I just pushed.
Yep. Okay, great. And so I'm on my feature branch. I'm on the PE-my feature, which you can see down here. And I'm not going to wait 10 minutes or whatever it is for the IDE to go look for the changes. I'm going to say fetch again. And I'm going to see there's another really. And when I click on it, when I click on that commit, I see the changes. And I can actually walk up to this, double click on it, and see this is not in my local files. This is actually not really even on my computer yet because I haven't pulled the changes. I've only fetched information about the changes. But it's telling me what that change was. If I go to page 2, I don't have really.
And I also feel it's the only way, the way I've been sabotaging you with 2 commits who are named really, the only way to do it is essentially, have a look at those changes.
As the great philosopher Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. So with this in mind, I now might feel a little bit safer about pulling in that change. Now, let's look at a little bit more of a case of that. I'm going to go to a branch. Oh, let's see. I forgot to push that other branch. I'm going to get main. I'm going to take a look at the swim lanes for main, because you see from a main perspective, there's this feature branch that is branched off of this commit. But then main continued on for origin. I'm going to now, instead of a fetch, I'm going to update my project, get those changes, and put them in my local files. And I see that. Use this visualization to your advantage, because it can get confusing what came from where. All right. And Marco, we're running a little low on time. Marco has another tip called merged commit view. I probably can just show it here, right?
Yep. You could just show it here. Yeah.
Instead of saying what's different between where I am and this commit, like saying compare, I might choose multiple commits. When I do, watch what happens here. It's showing me kind of the union of all changes. And if there are conflicting changes like a delete or an edit, and then a later delete, it would use the later one. But it's showing you across those 3 commits, here are all the changes. Maybe you want to see not what changed there, what changed there. Marco, any commentary on that?
So there's 2 things. One of the most important features in my mind, because it works everywhere where you have a list of commits, like in the Git log, or when you're about to push something, right, in the push window. And then you can actually highlight all the commits and you see what is outgoing, what are the effective changes, so to speak. Something I use a lot of, I have used a lot, just use it. And by the way, there was one question linked to my video, to my Git video. Maybe Paul, you can paste it, because
it's in the README, but I'll also put it into chat. Okay, last point, and then we'll do a wrap up, is the pull request tool. Michael Kennedy showed this pretty well. But still, it'd be nice to give a little bit more information and show one operation of it. This is one of my projects, and it is subscribed to Dependabot, which is something that can work with a GitHub repository to go look whenever a dependency changes. It will give you a pull request to update your project's dependencies to use that. And what it means is you get a lot of emails. So I'm going to open up this new tool window called the pull requests tool window. And this is our IDE connecting to GitHub's pull request facility. You can list the open pull requests. You can list the closed pull requests. You can start a pull request. You can go up to an individual pull request, like we'll say this one, double click on it. And without going to the browser, without leaving the IDE, you can see information about the pull request. You can look at the files that were changed. You can look at the commits. You can actually go into the code, start a review of someone else's pull request. And you can go to do a merge. You can also, if you want to actually see whether that code works or not, you can do a checkout and run the code locally, see if it passes tests, and then go and close the pull request. So for example, this is saying that I've got failures. I could merge anyway. etc. And then it closes the pull request. Marco, got anything to add to that?
There's a gazillion things that our GitHub integration can do. That's the short answer. So yeah, like you show which pull requests with everything else, working with forks, upstream repositories and all that kind of stuff. You need to check it out, but unfortunately we're running a bit out of time.
Yep. Okay, we're having a question from Frederick. Is it possible to handle submodules? For example, putting a UI on the addition of submodules, so you don't have to type get submodule updated recursive or switch to other submodule branches. Marco, got any experience with submodules?
Good question. I'm not entirely sure, but I'll try and figure out the answer.
We whether it's subtree, submodules, etc., these features have been in for a while. These are the kinds of things that take some baking over the years. And obviously Git doesn't stand still. They add flags and things like that. So that's an area that you and I aren't experts on, but feel free to contact us on Twitter. And I think that you see both of our Twitter handles on the screen, and we can get more information for you. But that's a good question. Okay, let's go ahead and switch back to the slides. All right. First, Marco, thanks, man.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for coming over. Make sure you go and watch Marco's video. And thanks for taking the time to talk to us about intermediate Git, making the case for letting the tool do the janitorial work for you, clean up on aisle 4, and how to drive PyCharm like a pro. We didn't have time to go over everything. There wouldn't be a long enough webinar to go over everything. Maybe we have to have like a full conference.
Yeah, full 5-day conference. Yeah.
5-day conference. Yeah. Day 1 would be pull request. But there are many other Git tasks that you can do within the IDE, whether it's novice, intermediate, or pro. Make sure to look us up for any. Marco, that's a good question. What is a pro Git thing in the IDE that you really value?
Oh, I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that, because for me it's a combination of all these features. There's not one pro thing that I value, but as we just said, it's not a pro thing, but this merge commit view is something that has saved my butt a couple of times. So I'm just going to go with that.
Yeah. We didn't get into cherry picking and things like that, where it's really just automating the drudgery. That's both soul crushing, certainly not, doesn't spark joy, but also prone to mistake. So let the tooling do it for you, so you'll get it right the first time. For me, I would say those things I wouldn't do, but I do because they're just so convenient. It's there in the gutter, and I'll let you do the undo for me.
Yep. Okay,
we'll go ahead and wrap up. If you'd like to get more information on PyCharm, please go to our website at jetbrains.com/PyCharm. If you haven't already, please check out the PyCharm blog, where you can get information about upcoming releases, things like this webinar, an announcement about the recording and stuff like that. We'd love your feedback on this webinar. If you signed up for this, you'll get a link to a survey. Fill it out. Actual humans actually read it, and we try to get better at doing these webinars.
We only want to hear the good stuff.
I think that gets deleted before it gets the bad stuff gets deleted before it gets to the advocates, because our egos are so fragile, right?
Yep.
But feel free to reach out to Marco or me or PyCharm on Twitter. Give any input on what you'd like to see in general, but on Git. So that's all from us today. Thanks for joining us. Hope you have a nice day.
Bye.